Welcome back. I'm Brandon, the HBAR Bull, once again joined by Zepsi. We both do some contract work for the HBAR Foundation, but we don't do these weekly updates in any official capacity. We're just coming to you personally to give you the latest in the Hedera ecosystem. Welcome, Zep.
How's it going, Brandon?
It's good, and we're going to get into it in a second. But as always, none of this is financial advice. Use it for entertainment or educational purposes only. So we have so much to get into today, including a regulatory update from George. We have breadcrumbs on PayPal. We have a revolutionary new DEX based off of Lehman's original vision for AppNets and their use within Hedera. But I want to lead off with Sharkbites because Rob had some absolute gold this week. So let's get into it. Hey, Rob, welcome back. How are things over in Europe?
I'm enjoying the hot Italian summer at the moment. It's beautiful. Thank you.
There you go. There you go. All right. Well, we're going to stick with the AMA format this week. I got a question from Hamza Dimes, 9780. He asked, where do you see the best case scenario for the Hedera ecosystem in 5 years? And where do you see the worst case scenario? We're going to avoid the really crazy stuff of, if the AI takes over the world or quantum computing makes all cryptography null and void or something along those lines. We're going to avoid the really catastrophic stuff. We'll assume that there is an internet. Where do you see the band of potential for Hedera?
I love this question because I'm a bit of a futurist, and my love of Hedera is actually usually 5 or 10 years out. So we'll keep it away from the 10 years, but 5 years is kind of within reach. And in fact, if we look back over the last 5 years and see how far Hedera has come in that time, it's pretty incredible, right? So 2018 only just launched in private beta, 2019 open access, but no Hedera consensus service, no token service, governing council only 5 members, and then rapid growth on all front, new services and consensus and tokenization. The council grew. 2021, we started the process of decentralization with the foundation and the association, forming. And then 2022, with Swells Labs breaking away again with more decentralization for the core engineering team. And then we've got this crazy amount of projects being built on Hedera, everything from startups all the way through to enterprise. And I've got a few government projects as well, which are kind of circling and taking a long time, but I'm sure will materialize. And we've got all this infrastructure in place now. So we've got wallets, we've got on-ramps and off-ramps, we've got DeFi protocols, we've got standards, we've got the Hedera smart contract service enabling interoperability and also migration of code. So all that's to say, in the last 5 years, we've come a very long way. In the next 5 years, I think we'll see, assuming some good tailwinds, assuming we come out of the bear market and the crypto winter, all of this building will start to flourish. We'll see a Cambrian explosion of new opportunities across the full spectrum. And 5 years is enough time, really, for some significant players to emerge and drive that move, that change from Web 2 to Web 3, whether it's starting natively in the Web 3 space or in the enterprise space where I'm working at the moment. The transition into Web 2.5 and Web 3 will accelerate, I have no doubt. Another tailwind might be the clarity around the regulatory posture in various jurisdictions, or the competitive tension between jurisdictions, drawing more and more business and opportunity and development into their realm. So all of those drivers I have no doubt, will accelerate adoption within the Web3 space writ large, but also with Hedera. I think Hedera is very, very well placed for taking these opportunities. And we know that we're focusing strategically across 3 core main pillars. This is what Christian has been talking about this year with customer engagement and loyalty and the retail end of the spectrum, with on-chain finance and stable coins and payments and driving real-world asset tokenization, and of course the sustainability aspects. I think in 5 years we'll see all of these themes merging, overlapping force multiplying the solutions. So we'll see all of this underpinned by some really good emerging infrastructure as well to enable some amazing Hedera-based solutions in the space of sustainability at potentially at a retail level, so we can audit and verify and trust personal carbon credits or personal biodiversity credits. That will all be achievable in that time frame. Supply chain tracking, track and trace, end to end will become viable because the friction of the payments versus delivery versus payments interactions, and the sustainability and emissions tracking all becomes viable. So these complex interrelationships between parties become possible using Hedera as a source of truth at scale without compromising on security or fairness, and with low predictive costs. All of these are enablers to these things happening. And then I suspect we'll see a lot of payments related applications as well, but at the micropayments end. What I'd dearly love to see, and what I've been working on for years, is utilizing tokenization or stable coins on Hedera to enable micropayments at the cent level. So viable unit cost of payment opens up all sorts of new commercial models, and I think that's achievable within this 5-year time frame as well. Beyond that, there'll be some crazy stuff, but let's keep it for now within that time frame.
Sure. I mean, it's been amazing what we've done over the past 5 years. Last week, I highlighted something that Jim with Acorp brought up, that you overestimate what you can achieve in a year, but you underestimate what you can achieve in 10 years. And it really has to do with, it being an exponential technology. In the beginning, you can see where you might be able to go, but the infrastructure just isn't in place. Now we're starting to see that infrastructure get in place. We used the example the other week of Health Ready, an application that's been built that wouldn't have been possible without what Jim has done at Acor, what Tomb Technologies has done. And that's what we're seeing across the board, whether it's payment solutions, market solutions, new services that are being provided by Hedera. Without some of these things in place, the really exciting stuff can't be built. But now that's starting to be put in place. And what is going to happen is they're going to start building on it, and we're going to see that hockey stick moment for Hedera.
Yeah, and Hedera's got this got these APIs that can be used by anyone. So it's a really easy entry level to utilizing these very, very powerful services. And that doesn't even have to be for developers. We've got this great range of low code or no code platforms now integrated with Hedera that enable small businesses to actually access the services that Hedera provides. So all of that requires learning, it requires education, it requires adoption. But that's happening, and it's happening at pace right now. So I think when I've said many times in the past that everyone will be using Hedera in the future, but most won't know it. That's the reason, because the solutions that you're using will be just plugged into the APIs underneath, and Hedera will be serving up all that decentralized goodness.
And speaking of APIs, we have a new one. It's not directly into the services, but it's the ChatGPT plugin that we just heard about. And CoinMan has a question around that. He said, AI and large language models like ChatGPT are receiving a lot of press right now. Are council members and other enterprises ahead of or behind the curve in adopting this tool? Are any of them already developing use cases that leverage both Hedera and some form of AI? And before we get into the enterprise perspective, I do want to say I just had a Twitter space with Humans.ai, Unthink AI, and Tomb Technologies, who are, all three of them are leveraging both AI and DLT, and Hedera. So that's already being done on the small business and the startup front. But what about the enterprise front?
Well, firstly, isn't it amazing that we're part of a community, an ecosystem in Hedera, which is for once on the front foot? Seeing that ChatGPT blog posting by Ed Marquez, and how easy it is to integrate with the ChatGPT and use it for Hedera. I was super proud on that day. It came out of nowhere. I wasn't aware of it. That said, yes, CoinMan, of course. There are many of the governing council members who are actively looking at AI and its implications and its applications. A very good friend of mine, one of the governing council, is head of emerging tech, which is DLT and AI. That's his whole purpose, right? And one of the the DLT side is Hedera because they're on the governing council. And being able to integrate with ChatGPT is actually a primary driver of his role and his personal objectives for this year. IBM, Tata, Wipro, of course, they're all very actively involved in AI. And although I haven't had those conversations directly with them, I'd be incredibly surprised if these two major technology enablers for change wouldn't be intersected within their companies. And then, I'm almost certain that more than half of the governing council would be looking actively at ways of utilizing ChatGPT and AI in general. And I'll be talking to each of them about it as I progress in my role.
Well, that's exciting. All right, so the last one we have, Steve Howard, 1232. He's asked this one a couple times. I've actually avoided it, but I do want to get into it. So he said, years ago, the excitement was about the step function and this driving price up. And of course, he's probably talking about the HBAR. I understand adding 10 billion in circulation doesn't help you, but I would think 1,400 TPS would move the price and not just follow Bitcoin. And then he says, thanks. So to start, before I get into talking about price, not financial advice, we highlighted in the beginning of the show, but since we're going to be talking about it here, I want to highlight that again. The HBAR, in my opinion, is a commodity, right? It is the fuel for the Hedera ecosystem. It also secures the network. So it's part of the secret sauce that makes a highly performant DLT like Hedera possible. So we're 3 orders of magnitude more efficient than the traditional rails, than Visa, what we're using on the internet right now. And the only way you can do that is with, number one, a highly performant consensus algorithm, and we have that in Hashgraph, but you also need proof of stake. At least that's all I've seen that can be as highly performant as Hedera in the space. You need something, a limited resource to secure the network. In proof of work, that's electricity. In proof of stake, that is the cryptocurrency itself. And of course, with commodities, you can have speculation around commodities. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't make it a security. You have gold, oil, natural gas, all the other commodities out there that there can be speculation around because whoever's using it or whoever wants to speculate thinks the price is going to go up because of market dynamics. The second thing around this question specifically is at MyO, I believe the narrative that built around this early this year did impact price. When we started this year, HBAR was at 3.8 cents. When @MyO hit, and then there was some other ecosystem developments, HBAR went up to about 10 cents. Now, there were other dynamics going on at that time. Crypto was kind of going up in general, but relative to most other networks, Hedera went up significantly more during that time. I think some of the shine did get knocked off when we had that exploit. That wasn't at the base layer, but there was an exploit around Hedera's smart contract showing, so to speak, that Hedera was human. There could be flaws, but it also showed that Hedera was, and I've said this several times, was anti-fragile, that when you stress the system, it actually comes back stronger. So I actually think it was positive. Humbled us a little bit, and we moved forward. But relative to what we saw elsewhere, Algorand, for example, I use Algorand a lot to compare Hedera to because it's another highly performant DLT. It came out around the same time. So I often looked at that to see how we're doing as a commodities investor. And in November of last year, Algorand, based off of total supply and market cap, was trading at a 40% premium to HBAR. So pretty significant. Right now, it's trading at a 50% discount. And I think a big part of that was some of the ecosystem developments that we had early in the year. A big part of that was at MyO. The other part of it, I think, is regulatory. They've gotten caught up in a couple of the enforcement actions that have taken place. There is, I think, a significant difference. Number one, I don't think Gary Gensler wants to get in a courtroom with Lehman and Mance, 2 ex-veterans who were USAFA professors and great orators and everything else. But also, there is a fundamental difference in how the tokens were distributed. Hedera has never distributed HBAR in anything except for a SAFT, a simple agreement for future tokens. That is a security. The contract itself is a security. Algorand, on the other hand, distributed using a Dutch auction. Now, it wasn't supposed to go to Americans, but who knows? I'm sure some Americans managed to get involved. But because they distributed directly to the public, that's a little bit different than how Hedera did things. And the HBAR, the main question around that is going to be secondary markets, because they went through the proper process of initially distributing it. It comes to that higher bar that is going to be a question that's answered later on by the judiciary, by the regulators, and by the legislature. But beside that, I think he's trying to get, is there going to be a direct link between the price of the HBAR, the price of that commodity, and high volume use cases? And I think there is. And it's going to be something called rotation, or what I've coined the term rotational demand. So in the case of Twigital, my partner and I have built an application on Hedera. And right now we're talking about buying HBAR to use as fuel to facilitate the use of our application. So when we buy that, we put that into a wallet. We buy the HBAR, it goes into a wallet. It sits there in the wallet until eventually we pay the fees. Then it goes into the Hedera treasury. The Hedera Governing Council has to decide, how are we going to use this HBAR? Are we going to use it to continue to build out the ecosystem? Are we going to add some new features to the network, incentivize token holders, incentivize nodes when we get community nodes, something along those lines, and then it'll eventually hit the market again. Well, during that time, that HBAR is held off the market. It's like removing the supply from the market. So that's kind of a rotational demand. Another thing they can do is incentivize token holders to secure the network. So that's two things that could allow a fair amount of use by these high volume use cases like Atm.io to impact price. Now, I do want to make it clear that Atm.io put a significant amount of resources into building their application. And the whole point of the HBAR was to help build out this ecosystem. So they received a grant. The fees right now are being paid by the grant HBAR that they received from the HBAR Foundation. So it's kind of just going around in a circle, but eventually, if they want to continue their application, they are going to have to pay those fees themselves and again get into that rotational demand dynamic that I was talking about before. Again, from an investor standpoint, and I started in the Hedera ecosystem as an investor, it's really the long run that gets me interested in what's going to happen. We had to distribute the HBAR over time, right? To secure the network, to have even distribution throughout the ecosystem, you have to distribute the token somehow. So my question is, what does it look like when and the big thing that's been done with that is to build out the ecosystem. Everything that the Swiss Hashgraph Association is doing, everything that the HBAR Foundation is doing to build out that ecosystem, to build out that infrastructure, that's all going to be done, or much of it is going to be done in a few years, just around the time when we don't need to distribute as many tokens. So that's the dynamic that I'm interested in from an investor standpoint. So Rob, I know I went on a bit of a diatribe there, but do you have any thoughts on that or anything else before we let you go today?
I actually think the price, and I've never spoken about price, but I think it's held up remarkably well in this market. It may not look like it, but like you say, if you look at the other layer ones in the region that Hedera resides, I think it's held up remarkably well. And then you look at the building. Then you look not just at the price, just at the sentiment in a bear market. You look at all the projects that are building, all the actual real world uses of it. And your rotational, whatever it was called, thing is a real dynamic, because in a bull market, and we'll move into a bull market in the next, whatever it is, year, 2 years, the price starts going up. And people will want to buy and fund their treasury and keep hold of their treasury at the lower price, not the higher price. So they'll buy more, and it becomes a virtuous cycle. More gets held and locked because the price goes up, and the price goes up more because more gets held and locked. That dynamic becomes exponential potentially, and because we've got all these builders, all these projects, all of the need to hold those HBAR in treasury to fund their operation, to be true utility on our network. As we turn the corner out of this bear market, strap in and enjoy the ride.
It's going to be a fun ride for sure. I'm still enjoying this AMA format. So anybody who has any questions for Rob or I, make sure that you get those questions down in the description. Rob, thank you again for coming, and we'll see you next week.
My pleasure. See you next week. Cheers, Brent.
I mean, as always, great to hear from Rob, and especially to hear those sort of 5 to 10 year optics, because we've always understood that Hedera is a 100-year company, and we've always understood that we're in the nascence of this technology. And I think it's very important to remind ourselves that even in these very, very early stages of this technology and these very, very early days of adoption, we are seeing Hedera really lead the pack in the kind of institutional use cases. And I think when we look even further into 5 years and we think that the governing council members, as Robert's discussed before, the vast majority of them are building, when we've got these kind of blueprints out, when there's iterations on these blueprints from other enterprises, that's really when it's going to get exciting. When we've got a completely self-sufficient network, when the HBAR is being used for all these transactions, and we can really sit back and go, right, we have a network that is generating revenue off its own back. And we also have other ecosystems like the retail and so on that are taking their own sort of, taking off in their own rights. So I think, having those sort of realistic 5-year goals and hearing micropayments in that, hearing finance in that, hearing consumer engagement in that, obviously massive. And then, of course, hearing the governments. We heard that they're working with 2 governments, I believe, which is, very exciting in itself.
Hedera is absolutely engaging with governments right now, and we saw that with what Rob had to say. And Nilmini Rubin was another one. Another one is Brett. He sent a letter, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But can you tell us a little bit more about what we saw Nilmini come out with this week?
Yeah, so I mean, Nilmini has been everywhere. She's the head of global policy at Hedera, recruited in the last year or so. And she was actually, I think she was a WEF global young leader and all these amazing things. She's got some incredible accolades behind her in terms of, who she knows, what she knows, and, her respect within the industry. So she was at Young Global Leaders in Brussels 2023. She was sharing her insight on decoding European tech agenda. So this is, talking to global leaders across government, industry, and the media, and the young people that are coming up into those positions and sort of educating them on in this case, the tech agenda, but for Hedera, of course, as sort of the trust layer, the DLT layer within that. We also saw her with the deputy head of the Secretary General Office of the Commonwealth SEC. And the Commonwealth SEC is a group of 56 different countries that work together on sort of tech, innovations, development, democracies, and sort of championing the voices of countries that are less heard. And, this ideal of sort of, tech for democracy, blockchain for democracy, or at least bringing more democracy into the world of tech, technologies, finance, whatever it is, of course, goes perfectly into what already she's got us in the door with, which was the US call for the Democracy Roundtable. So, I mean, we've got Nilmini championing us at the heart of the UK. We've got a champion at the heart of the US, and all Hedera-centric. And that's not even the end, The last thing we saw this week was her at Chatham House, which is one of the leading policy think tank engines in the UK. And she was at the heart of that. I don't know who else was there. That's part of the Chatham rules that you're not allowed to say which other players were there. But we do know that Chatham House has very strong ties with global governments, of course, the UK, but also beyond that. So to have Nilmini there championing Hedera at the highest powers that be, I think that's very exciting for that sort of grassroots policy making when policy is very nascent. To have Hedera in the room helping guide that, I think, can only bode well for us.
Well, when she came on board with Hedera, she didn't break her stride. She hit the ground running, and we have plenty of engagement across the board. Another one was the letter that Brett, the chairman of Hedera, sent to the SEC. We were going to talk with George just about the Coinbase stuff, everything we talked about last week, and he had some great insights on that, but he also wanted to give some feedback on that letter from Brett. So let's listen to what George had to say. Just a quick note before we get started. The following is not legal advice and does not represent the opinion of the HBAR Foundation. Welcome back, George.
Thanks for having me back, Brandon.
Yeah, of course. So what we're here for today, there's a couple topics, but the first one is Coinbase recently filed to have the SEC's suit against them thrown out. In the filing, they cite several things you discussed a few weeks ago, including the question around if these tokens are securities at all and the major questions doctrine. They also mentioned fair notice, which I thought was an interesting read. What are your thoughts on this filing by Coinbase?
Yeah, what a filing. So First and foremost, I thought it was really impressive that they didn't take their time. They had plenty of time to file this. I think the deadline was August, but they rushed to file this, and it was a well-drafted piece. So I was not expecting it this soon. So I was excited to read it. We kind of knew the arguments that were going to be made, right? Like you mentioned, we discussed this during the previous session, and none of it was really surprising. What I found very telling was how negative the narrative is for the SEC, right? The facts, and how much does Coinbase tried to talk to the SEC, and how the SEC was not playing ball, not giving them any kind of direction or creating a path forward. That I think is really what differentiates this action versus others that we've seen. It's just the narrative has been developed to a point where it's going to be very hard for the SEC to fight back on, I believe.
Okay, that's fair enough. So why do you think they filed it, and what are the chances of success?
Well, yeah, if I had a crystal ball, I'd definitely be asking the same questions. So they filed it. I mean, they had to, right? So they had to respond to the complaint. And so it's part of the process of litigation where you either file an answer or you file a motion to dismiss. Here, the SEC, Coinbase took what I think is a pretty good approach where they filed, it's a type of an answer that allows Coinbase to bring in more of the facts than had they just gone with a motion to dismiss. And motion to dismiss, the reason crypto companies have been unsuccessful in motion to dismiss is that the courts have to take everything in the complaint as truth, right? So it's very hard to negate that when you can't really bring in other evidence. Here, the approach that Coinbase took allows it to bring in different evidence, and now the court has a much fuller view of the actual facts as they played out.
So you talked about, the major questions doctrine before. You also touched on the question around what are securities, but we didn't talk about this fair notice part of it. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, the fair notice is one that's been coming up a lot recently, especially in the Ripple litigation. And that's why Ripple was seeking all of Hinman's communications related to his infamous speech at this point about sufficiently decentralized. For those who aren't aware, just quickly, what that speech was, it was a pretty monumental speech at the time, around 2018, middle 2018, when Hinman, a commissioner for the SEC, came out and created this new paradigm in the securities world completely, where he essentially said, like, look, something that's issued as a security, specifically here, speaking of Ether, can become sufficiently decentralized such that it's no longer a security. That was new. That's a very new paradigm, and I took it at the time as a positive, right? It's the SEC showing that it's trying to create a path forward for the ecosystem. It's now becoming relevant again in the Ripple action because they're also claiming that they're using the fair notice defense as well. The fair notice defense essentially says, look, we didn't know what the law was. We weren't on fair notice of what the law was. So how could we, so you can't bring this action until you've given us fair notice. They used the Hinman emails, the back and forth, where they're, the internal discussions around marking up the communications, essentially to say, look, because some of the comments that they point to, they say, look, this speech, and this is an internal SEC discussion where another commissioner, I believe one of the top person says, look, I think this speech might actually create more uncertainty than provide any certainty into the space because of this new paradigm it creates. Ripple is pushing that communication to essentially say, look, the SEC didn't even know where its regulatory jurisdiction started and ended with regard to these assets. Coinbase is doing the same thing. They're going to be making the same argument. And here they're using additional facts because the SEC, Coinbase has discussed this issue with the SEC ad nauseum, right? The amount of meetings they cite and calls they cite, even one specifically with Gensler himself, they've really been trying to do it well. And I really enjoyed how they laid it out.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Now, this certainly has an impact on Hedera, but it's not specifically about Hedera. The next thing we're going to talk about is, so the chair of the Hedera board, Brett McDowell, sent a letter to the SEC stating that the rules they were trying to implement pertaining to DLT validators could have negative impacts on the innovation in the space. Shocker there, right? What were your thoughts on Brett's letter to the regulator, the SEC?
Look, I was happy to see that Hedera is taking an affirmative stance in this position. When I first read the rulemaking to expand the definition of exchange, it was just shocking to me, just because it was such an expansive draft and provided very little guidance, uses very broad terms to regulate a space, and terms like a group of people, and I'm paraphrasing, I may not have it exactly correct, a group of people that provide access to a communications protocol. Group of people is not defined. Communications protocol is not defined. These are brand new terms. And Hedera's argument in their letter is that because they're not defined, is a validator now going to be captured here, required to register? is any other participant in the ecosystem going to now be brought into some regulatory regime, SEC regulatory regime? Funny enough, what the SEC's response to that in the letter was, well, maybe these different validators, these different participants can come together, create a company, and register, or they could just stop doing what they're doing. For me, I took that to mean like the SEC does not care about the industry, and the repercussions are the repercussions.
So essentially what they were trying to say is that the validators for these distributed networks are exchanges themselves, right?
Yeah, so that's right. So I think what they're saying is they're in the hunt. The SEC is on the hunt for someone to regulate, right? Mm-hmm. When you have DeFi or decentralized applications, almost by definition, if it's truly DeFi, you have no intermediary. Regulators regulate intermediaries. So you remove the intermediaries, you have no one to regulate. So the CFTC has previously tried to regulate code developers by saying that, look, as long as it was reasonably foreseeable that the code would be used to violate one of its rules, then the developer would be aiding and abetting that violation. That was, I would say, unsuccessful. They managed to get a settlement out of the developers, but I don't think it holds much weight, especially because in a parallel action, the DOJ had a hung jury twice and dropped the case. They didn't pursue it. So now the SEC finds itself in a similar position where it's like, well, if DeFi does take off, if you have all these decentralized exchanges, who can we go after? Well, a validator. So they're saying, look, it's the validator potentially, because the language is broad enough to capture the validators. They're saying the validators are the ones consummating the transactions. Therefore, they're doing regulated activities and should come in and register.
Yeah. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but they're trying to go after something. It's just not a very conducive environment at this point. So why do you think it was important for Hedera to send this letter? And has there been other layer ones that have taken similar action?
Yeah, so a lot of different DOT entities submitted in response to this rulemaking. It's part of the process, and one of the things actually that I think that the SEC did correct here, where they were actually going through the rulemaking process, which allows industry participants to submit their comments and their suggestions and their concerns, and the SEC then has to respond to those comments, questions, and concerns, as opposed to what we see regularly coming out of the SEC is where they state their position in an enforcement action, right? So it's a good process. A lot of different DOT entities have actually taken the opportunity to submit comments, and I'm just happy to see that Hedera is one of them because it is so important to the entire ecosystem.
Well, this is going to be interesting to track. I know there's going to be news coming out on a regular basis, so we really appreciate you coming by and giving us some insight from a legal opinion.
Of course, anytime, Brandon.
So, Zep, I'm hoping to get George back on a regular basis to give us updates on what's going on with these developments around regulation, legislation, around the judiciary, and everything else. But we also had some news that I think it could bode well for us on those fronts. And that is that Larry Fink came out this week. And of course, they already had their spot Bitcoin ETF filed, but he's kind of going on a publicity tour now. He's talking about not just the virtues of Bitcoin, but the virtues of cryptocurrency. So he was also the one who famously said that the future of securities and financial markets is going to be tokenization on public networks like Hedera. So this is going to be really interesting to watch how this develops. But the fact that he's getting out there and actually speaking directly to some of these media outlets is really interesting. And we're continuing to make strides in other jurisdictions as well. You already mentioned the UK, and we have the Middle East certainly starting to heat up as well. And there was some news that came out of the HBAR Foundation this week around RackDAO. Can you give us some more information on that?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of development within the UAE, this is massive for the foundation and Hedera. You know, we know that the UAE is a rising star for Web3 innovation. We know that Dubai is sort of the capital of that in terms of, pro-regulation, pro-innovation, funding this innovation at a very grassroots level. And we know that there's lots of people looking to go out there. But to go out there isn't as easy as it might sound. Going out to a new country, a foreign country, and setting up business isn't always that easy. And so what this relationship entails between RackDAO and the foundation is that for any grantees that come into RackDAO and then into the foundation, or from the foundation into RackDAO, it enables them with all these different sort of fast track routes to setting up shop in the UAE. So you get a banking partner that walks you through it. You get all the different legislative help, lawyers, this kind of stuff. but also you get different help financially, business development, with networking, marketing, everything. So for many, many crypto companies that do want to go out there, this is, I think, is a very attractive package for them. And so RAK is the name of Ras Al Khaimah, which is a region in the UAE. Of course, I probably butchered that pronunciation. And so in the region where RAK DAO is, we had the Sheikh, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Hamad bin Abdullah Al Qasimi. He says, by creating and enabling the world's first licensed Web3 ecosystem, we're facilitating the seamless exchange of information, connecting businesses across sectors, and paving the way for synergistic relationships to flourish. Together, we are unlocking a world of new possibilities, empowering entrepreneurs, and propelling innovation forward. This collaboration is a testament to our shared commitment to driving sustainable growth and shaping a future where Ras Al Khaimah emerges as a global leader in the digital economy. So we've had the sheikh of this region come out saying that he wants to make RAK the leader in the Web3 economy in UAE, which of course would be massive. And he's chosen the Foundation and Hedera as his partner to achieve that. So of course, anyone that comes through Foundation to RAK DAO will be building on Hedera, and those exclusive rights apply to the Foundation grantees and the builders in the ecosystem. So a really, really favorable value proposition there for builders to go out there. And I hope that we'll see lots of different, new startups emerging on Hedera because of it.
Yeah, going back to what Rob said, we're seeing like competition between these different jurisdictions, and that's going to continue to put pressure on the U.S., which of course is always going to be kind of a leader in that space. All right, so we're going to take one of our kind of hard left turns here. We're going to go into a DEX. It's HBAR Suite. They've been doing fantastic work. I'm really impressed with the methodical way they're rolling out their DEX. They seem very professional, and of course, the tech improvements that we're seeing come out of them are really impressive as well. So let's see what they have. Ronan, H Suite is a completely new way of operating a decentralized exchange. Can you review the structure of the HBAR Suite DEX and how it works?
The Smart Node decentralized exchange operates on a user experience level that is largely similar to other smart contract DEXs in the market. However, it distinguishes itself through two key features. Firstly, our platform utilizes zero slippage automated market maker, eliminating the need for users to establish any slippage tolerance. Secondly, we are the sole DEX that provides precise details of the amounts taken by the exchange before the transaction is actually executed. So you can actually see the transaction, the exact amount before, rather with other exchanges, you can only get estimations. So with our exchange, you can actually see the exact amount you will receive. This contrasts with smart contract DEXs on Hedera, where the exact parameters of transactions remain unclear until after the proposal. Further, our smart node DEX offers a unique advantage in terms of transaction fees. In the event of a failed swap, our platform does not levy any charges, unlike other DEXs that impose fees regardless of transaction success. An additional benefit to Smart Node DEX is that native integration with Hedera. This results in significantly lower HBAR gas fees compared to those associated with smart contract HBAR fees, providing further value to our users. As of July 4th, the DEX swaps are available to the public. Meanwhile, in a month from now, liquidity injection will begin for HBAR NFT holders. And 2 months from now, if injection will be open to the public as well. Currently, there are only 2 pairs whitelisted on our DEX, which are HBAR Suite and HBAR, and H Suite and HBAR. We are planning on whitelisting all other well-known HTS tokens in 3 months from now. Instead, this slow rollout of our DEX features has been implemented to make sure that everything works as expected without need for tweaks or fixes. We at a HBAR Suite prioritize high security as well as high quality services.
That's one thing I've noticed. You guys have been very methodical in your rollout, and the benefits you talked about are pretty impressive. Now, as you mentioned, you aren't fully through your roadmap to full functionality on your DEX, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But smart nodes are being used and they're being used successfully. How has the use of smart nodes translated from theory into real world use?
Pachi, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I was gonna take that. Thanks a lot for the question, Brandon. So, over the past year, as we developed the core smart node technology and all its array of features, including the DEX, NFT DEX, NFT Launchpad, DAO engine, token manager, NFT staking capabilities, and so on, we actually faced a lot of challenges. Like while we were designing the architecture of how the smart nodes are supposed to interface with Hedera, with the Hedera SDK, and such. But yeah, this primarily revolved around basically designing the architecture and functionality flow. And we frequently encountered, I wouldn't call them issues. There were certain limitations that were related to the fact on how interacting with the Hedera side of things. And those limitations necessitated adaptation and restructuring of the smart node technology to ensure its proper functioning. So we basically always found workarounds. Like with the smart nodes, there is nothing that cannot be done regarding of development, especially using Hedera as a layer 0 and layer 1. Yeah, the beauty of the smart node technology, it's very limitless. Like we have been very focused into developing this core technology with all these showcase features in the past year, or more than a year now. But now coming up, we are going to make sure that there will be more marketing rollout and brand awareness, because the smart node technology is something that could really be leveraged for any possible use cases, whether maybe enterprise use case or community retail use case for private or public consensus. We at HBAR Suite were very proud of the exceptional work we've done to bring the smart nodes to life, because it's UpNet vision that we created through the smart nodes. It's been a great achievement, a great, for us, it's like a great use case example of how data could alternatively be used without the need of smart contract, but still retaining decentralization. And yeah, this was a great journey that we have going through, and that we're still like going through a lot of things, and we're super grateful to the community that we have behind and the support that we have had since now.
Well, Ronan kind of already touched on some of this, but I would like to get some more information on your roadmap and how people can get involved. So, can you just run through that again, real quick, and let us know how the community can get engaged?
Yeah, of course. So regarding our roadmap, in a little more than a year, we managed to deliver quite many showcase features such as the zero slippage DEX, NFT DEX, Launchpad, NFT staking, DAO engine, token manager, and we also are about to deliver the long-awaited feature of the multi-sig wallet manager, which will allow people to create multi-signature wallets, whether it is for friends, family, or businesses, in order to manage funds, cryptocurrencies in a decentralized manner on Hedera network. For the little amount of time that we took for building all of this was a great achievement. This was all done alongside the core technology of the smart nodes. So I wasn't just building those things from scratch, but we were building from scratch this core technology. And as soon as the multi-signature feature is delivered, which will be very imminently, we are initiating the phase 2 of the project, or roadmap 2, if you will. And the roadmap 2 entails, for the most part, the priority will go through developing proper SDK so that other developers can begin building utilizing the smart nodes. And for many features, that's it. So if they want to, for example, build their own launchpad, or integrate, eventually make their own DEX with their own nodes, they could also eventually be able to do that. So we want to make sure that developers will see the advantages on building through the smart nodes, and we will try to make it as easy as possible, especially it's because they're built in JavaScript on its core, TypeScript. And if you think about it, there are many more developers in the world that are familiar with JavaScript and TypeScript more than like Solidity, which is the classic programming language for smart contracts. So we have a potential of having many more developers coming in who may not have the experience with Solidity, but they have lots of experience with JavaScript in the backend side of things that would facilitate proper implementation of Web3 features. We will also have in our roadmap some smart node cross-chain use cases that we cannot yet mention particularly, but we already are planning some cross-chain use cases. We will focus on the marketing for community and enterprise side of things. We will eventually release, by the end of the year, we're planning on releasing the smart node validators for the community to start running nodes as well as earning fees from it. We will definitely have many DEX improvements. As we are going through a slow rollout, we will have many ways of creating market flow movements and incentivizations in order for users to benefit from our decentralized exchange. We will also do work on a version 2 of our NFT DEX, which means that we will be implementing a rarity factor into our market maker for the NFT DEXs, which means that right now when you create an NFT pool, you just put an NFT ID, a certain amount of quantity, and then you put a bonding curve with HBAR or whatever other fungible token you have on the other side. But soon, with the V2, you will be able to also implement a rarity algorithm, because sometimes in a whole collection, maybe serial number 10 or another serial, another particular NFT may have more particular features and traits that may make it more expensive compared to another one or more valuable. So we will introduce that as well. We will also have a stacking 2.0, which means that right now the way we do staking for ourselves or other projects is based through NFT, where if you hold an NFT, you will receive a certain amount of tokens airdrop to you. But we will implement advanced feature depending if, for example, a token has a freeze key. That means that we could, for example, implement a non-custodial way of staking where the tokens remain into your account, but they're just frozen. Or else if there is no freeze key, there will be more of a custodial manner where you have to send certain tokens to an escrow account, so to speak. But more detail will come up as we go later in the year. Yeah, those were like the most key points of the roadmap, but there may be others that will be eventually added in the future, but we don't want to say too much just yet, still in the further developments.
Well, we know how versatile Hedera is, whether it comes to the Hedera consensus service, the token service, and there's been some great implementations of the smart contracts. But initially, it was planned to use these app nets. That's what it was designed for. That was Lehman's initial vision. So the fact that you guys are running with it and having so much success is amazing, and we're really excited about it. Thank you guys so much for swinging by. We appreciate you coming by and telling us about the HBAR Suite DEX.
Thanks a lot, Brendan.
Thanks for having us, Brandon.
Yeah, Zep, I'm loving how they are tackling that initial vision that Lehman had for AppNets within Hedera. All right, so staying with some exchanges, we have something that came out of Bittrex this week. Now, Bittrex, of course, left the United States, but they're still operating internationally, and they now listed the XSGD token, right?
Exactly. So the XSGD is the digital Singapore dollar stablecoin from StraightX. We had this announcement come out a while ago that, this had now been created, the token had been created, but this is the first centralized exchange listing. And as I understand, it's one of the biggest non-dollar stablecoins, and they've, of course, chosen Hedera for a multitude of reasons that they announced in the first press release, being the fixed fees and carbon negative being those two primary reasonings. I think this is actually our first real, at least our first non-dollar stablecoin that's on a centralized exchange. So I think really exciting there from the FinTech and Payments Fund. And I hope to see it used sort of throughout different DeFi ecosystems and throughout different use cases within the sort of Southeast Asia region.
Again, we're moving to another region, Southeast Asia, which we're really blowing up in. So that's good to see. All right, so we're going to move over to some enterprise things. I caught up with Ryan Solomon from Genfinity, who originally made a name for himself by the digging he would do, the research he would do, kind of like Danny Eads. But one of the things that Ryan focuses on is patents. And he dug up some stuff around PayPal, which, of course, we talked a lot about in early 2021 because there were a lot of breadcrumbs then. But he found some new things that I thought were really interesting to address. So let's listen to that one. Welcome back, Ryan.
Hey, thanks, Brandon. It's always a pleasure to be here, man.
Yeah, it's been a little while since you've been on Hedera Forum. We've talked on a fairly regular basis, but this is great. So we're going to be getting into PayPal and Hedera today. And I guess I want to give some history on PayPal and Hedera and some interactions to the audience just to get them up to speed. So going back to 2020, late 2020, early 2021, we had a champion at PayPal. His name was John Padilla. He was the head of blockchain at PayPal. So he was an executive in the perfect position to enable collaborations between Hedera and PayPal. And he would like a lot of Hedera's stuff. He even was a judge for one of Hedera's hackathons. So we thought we were well on our way to not only major collaborations, but even a potential council membership from PayPal, which of course would have been huge. But not long after that, John Padilla left PayPal to pursue some other things. And I think for major collaborations or to get a council membership or something along those lines, you really do need that champion within the organization. But that doesn't mean that they didn't continue to consider Hedera and its potential for their business. And we have some great detectives in the space. Danny Eads always comes up. But when it comes to patents, you're one of the best detectives out there in the blockchain space in general. And you found a couple patents that caught your eye when it comes to PayPal. They just filed them recently. Can you tell us a little bit about them?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, and I always liked doing deep dives. I don't nearly have enough time anymore. I mean, I remember even going back to 2020 and the SecNav and Department of Defense with smart grids, with Hedera being mentioned, was pretty crazy. But the two PayPal ones, and I was just kind of randomly digging in, there was applications filed a little bit earlier, but they've been, I'd say 2022, but the publication of both of these patents was on the same date, June 15th. So just a couple of weeks ago. The first one was a patent entitled Utilization of Biometrics in Creation of Secure Keys or Digital Signatures. So I think that's dealing a lot more into security aspects around signatures as well as key creation. There was some interesting stuff in that. The one that I found really kind of interesting was the other patent that was publicized on the same day. So again, June 15th, which was automatic access or restriction of NFTs. What I found pretty cool within this is that we always hear people say one Bitcoin is always one Bitcoin. Well, PayPal literally stating in here, and this is verbatim, like physical money, cryptocurrencies are fungible. For example, they can be traded or exchanged one for another. For example, one HBAR is always equal in value to another HBAR. This fungibility characteristic makes cryptocurrencies suitable for use as a secure medium of transaction in the digital economy. And I won't get too far into the weeds with this, but it's really interesting. There was a couple comments. So somebody commented, well, it's like, well, isn't that true for everybody? And aren't they just giving random examples? I'm like, yeah, but why would they mention Bitcoin, number one, Ethereum, number two, and then Hedera, number 33, just randomly? But those are the only three digital assets. Also, to see that PayPal is certainly looking at the broader sense of tokenization and how these ledgers can be utilized, how NFTs can be utilized. And it's just cool to see Hedera, well, HBAR, proper HBAR, still in the conversation from PayPal. And I mentioned to you a couple of days ago, Brandon, I'm like, it's just weird that both of those things were publicized on the same exact day too. So I would imagine there's some crossover between those patents. So,
well, one of the things we hear from a lot of people like Rob Allen, who knows so much about the space, is there's going to be enterprises who might talk about what they're doing. We're thinking about Coupon Bureau and Atma.io. You might know well beforehand what they're working on. But there's also going to be a lot of enterprises for a lot of reasons, competition, and just keeping some trade secrets that aren't going to talk about what they're doing until they're ready to actually launch it or getting closer. And that might have been one of the reasons why this has been delayed so much. They put out the patents. They know it's going to be public information at that point. So that might have been one of the reasons why they were holding off. But it is just good to see that they're still considering Hedera. And like you said, to talk about Bitcoin and talk about Ethereum, that makes perfect sense. But then to skip another 30 places down to Hedera, it means there's other things that are special about Hedera that they're paying attention to.
Yeah, and I'm certainly excited. I mean, we find these things kind of randomly. I have seen it a couple of times where when you find information, it maybe forces the hand a little bit. I don't want to assume that relationship is 100% there, but it's awesome to see HBAR mentioned directly alongside Bitcoin and Ethereum and literally two publicized patents through PayPal back to back. It's awesome. So,
Brian, before letting you go, I want to thank you for not only everything you do within the Hedera ecosystem, but for the entire crypto space. I really think in the long run, your efforts to bring communities together will have a huge impact. So thank you for that, and thank you for stopping by today.
Really appreciate it, Brandon. I'm sure this won't be the last time that we do this. So.
And Zep, sticking with enterprises, we had some additional things come out around Hedera and their use within Shopify with Venly. Can you give us some more information on that?
Yeah, so I mean, this isn't the first time we've heard from Shopify, which is great. We had that drop micropayments integration a while ago,
Sure.
whereby people could pay with micropayments, for these sort of sub-cent sort of payments, or to make it at least cost efficient under say 5 cents. But this week we've got Venly came out rather with their Shopify NFT app. So this puts us along shoulder to shoulder with Avalanche and Polygon. There's now the three of us. So that's very exciting, I think, alone because Polygon's massive, Avalanche is massive, and they've obviously chosen Hedera here as that more sort of enterprise side of that trio. And so within the context of this announcement, users will be able to go on Shopify, create, mint, and sell NFTs completely with no code through the Venly app on Hedera. And so when you don't have any of this coding, of course, that brings down a barrier to entry immediately, but also the users will be paying with credit cards or paying with cash, whatever it is. So Venly sort of abstracts that layer between having to purchase HBAR, whatever it is, to then mint. They are doing all this themselves. So it's really, really making it as easy lifting on the creator, on the shop as possible. And so this is our first sort of big integration into an e-commerce website for NFTs. And they've set up their first campaign with us there. And I'm excited to see what shops emerge and use Hedera, of course, as the most inexpensive option on out of the three.
Yeah, and as soon as I saw this news, I actually started to think about Twigital because, of course, Twigital is going to capture those physical objects. It's going to mint them into NFTs, and Shopify, their main business is around physical objects, right? Selling physical objects and shipping and everything along those lines. So I think there's certainly some synergies there. So I want to certainly get in contact with those teams. All right, so we're going to shift gears here again before we get into network analysis because I saw some stuff come out of Earthlings, and it was absolutely beautiful. Of course, their graphics are always beautiful, but I just wanted to highlight some of these things and just take a look. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, they continue to build. They're a team that consists of some of the most passionate HBAR variants, and they seem to be moving mountains with a relatively small team. Their rate of development looks great, the in-game footage looks great, and the connections they've made throughout the ecosystem have been great to see as well. And that actually they've announced something with Hashpack yesterday, I believe. I don't know the full utility of that yet, but I think it was something to do with having an in-game back and that being sort of your Hashpack kind of thing. So we'll learn more about that. But, for them to partner there with Hashpack as obviously one of the biggest, at least biggest by sort of active users in the ecosystem, that's a really, really great partnership to see.
I think like we see with so many teams, Earthlings shows what, if you have some passion in this space and then the tools that are available within our ecosystem, what you can do. All right, let's go ahead and get into some network analysis. So over the past 24 hours, we've had over 116 million transactions. We've had an average TPS of nearly 1.4 thousand and a max TPS of 4,500. We also hit a pretty important milestone. We crossed 13 billion transactions. Our time to consensus is hovering just over 5 seconds, and we've created nearly 50,000 accounts over that past week. Looking at the fungible tokens, we have Wrapped HBAR, Energy Trade Token, Sauce, Zero, and Karate, which has been bucking the downtrend in the crypto space. We have XSauce, Tier, USDC, and Warsome Wizards that round out the top 10. Also of note, though not in the top 10, is Sauce Inu. So Zeb, have you caught some of the excitement around Sauce Inu?
Yeah, for full disclosure, I own some Sauce Inu before we get into it. But I have, I've been caught up in the excitement there for sure. This is, we've seen a couple meme coins really take off now. The first, of course, being Grelf, and it seems that now Saucino is also up there with Grelf. And everyone has conflicting views on meme coins, but I don't think you can deny that it brings some excitement, it brings new users in, and it shows that there is some kind of retail energy within an ecosystem. We've seen the power of, say, Pepe on Ethereum. We saw the power of Doge with Shibu. Just how many people that gets into an ecosystem, how many people talking about it. We don't look at these things and think they're going to be 100 years companies or whatever it is in the same way we look at Hedera, but they're there. They're part of the ecosystem. They're part of sort of Web3 culture as it currently stands. And I think they have a part to play. And, I'm not going to throw shade at any projects. I think that if a project can turn over that much volume, they've been absolutely shelling the volume on SourceSwap. I think, more power to them. I don't know who the team is, so I'm not going to endorse them. But I think just looking and seeing, what they've been doing in terms of volume, that's been really exciting. But again, meme coins is essentially gambling. You've got to understand what you're doing, understand the risk you're taking. But yeah, shout out to what they've done, but I don't want to endorse too much because, I don't know who's behind it.
Well, they're trying to bring attention to Saucer Swap, of course, a fantastic DEX. They're trying to bring attention to Hedera. But yeah, that disclaimer of, especially when we start to catch notice because it has that higher volume, it might be going through one of those spikes. And like Grelf, after we did cover it, it dropped down. That doesn't mean it's a rug. It just means that, hey, some of the excitement might have cooled off. It doesn't mean it's the end of the project either. All right, so I am going to go into what they say on their site about Sauce Inu. So Sauce Inu is a community-based, Inu-themed cartoon of the Sauce token. The project was primarily created to promote SaucerSwap and uplift users of the Hedera ecosystem. Sauce Inu was distributed to reward users who stake XSauce, as there was an initial tiered distribution to all XSauce holders who held greater than 100 XSauce tokens. Our primary mission on Hedera is to promote the best DEX on Hedera, SaucerSwap, their words, not mine. Additional goals are to bring new members from other communities by displaying the power of Hedera and SaucerSwap in cartoon fashion, and continually spread love and cheer to the Hedera community through positivity and sustained engagement. And they also have an NFT drop. The whitelist drop is probably going to be a few hours before this gets posted. The general public might be able to get access maybe about an hour afterwards, so certainly check that out. And Zep, moving down to fungible tokens, we have Blade Wallet's token there at the top, and they had an event here recently. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so as we heard from Rob in Sharkbites, one of the core verticals that Hedera is focused on is consumer engagement. That kind of intersection between brands, NFTs, and getting people to come back or getting people to want to engage with your brand further. And so they set up this stall at Cocktails in the City, which is one of the big sort of drinks events in London. They got sort of different 30 or 40 different stalls of what is supposedly the best cocktails. And they all sort of side by side. You go there in the sun, you get your drink, whatever. But rather than just going away, with a happier self, hopefully, and a few less pennies in your pocket, you can go to the Blade Labs stall and, scan the QR code and vote on which stall you thought was the best. And so through engaging further with the Cocktails in the City brand, you get rewarded sort of loyalty tokens, so you can go back with vouchers for more drinks. You get put into a raffle for, say, an overnight stay in a hotel, just different perks to keep you engaged, to keep you coming back, and to keep exposing the undercore brand, which is, of course, is Cocktails in the City in that case. And so we know that, Blade is partnering with lots of different companies like this, going to these different events, and, really is a crucial underpinning of this consumer engagement push. So, only excited to see more of what happens from them there.
Yeah, they're hitting on all cylinders. There's no question about that. And staying with the consumer engagement push and NFTs in general, the number 2 token was from Roadcode, and they're getting engaged right now with the Tour de France. Pretty impressive.
Definitely. I mean, the Tour de France is the biggest cycling event in the world. It's one of the most watched one of the most watched sporting events, in the world. It came up one year close to competing with the similar figures to the World Cup, which is insane to think. And so Roadcode, of course, is at the heart of that. They work with Velon, which is one of the biggest cycling brands, and some of the biggest names under them, the biggest teams under them. And they're getting this exclusive footage from the cyclists, getting this exclusive data from the cyclists and putting it into their platform as NFTs and as different digital experiences. So exciting to see this first real rollout with the Tour de France on this massive scale. And hopefully, we'll see more and more Web2 users that are interested in learning more about the cyclists, learning more about or seeing more of this footage. Hopefully they'll be engaging there. And, we see, like you said, each week we see them minting and minting and minting. So hopefully there's users there finding value in that. I for one, definitely am.
Well, these are great examples of Hedera working in the background. But getting back to the NFTs in the top 10, we also have Pixel Ronin, we have Codes, we have Epic Phone, Warsome Wizards, Boons, Dead Pixels, and we also have Karateka, which of course is associated with Karate Combat. So Zeb, another thing I saw this week was some thought leadership coming from you on Twitter around NFTs. What were you saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the last sort of 2 weeks or so, we've seen some of the biggest Ethereum, Polygon sort of brands within the NFT space prove that they aren't really brands as much. We had the Bored Ape Yacht Club, which is of course the biggest one, but And that is, of course, one of the hallmarks of NFTs, one of the faces of NFTs. But they're really struggling to keep this momentum behind their brand image, to really be a business that permeates beyond just Web3 culture. They've tried gaming, they've tried metaverses, they tried all different stuff. And we saw another team, Azuki, that also had their second gen mint, and people realized that there was nothing ingenuitive, and it was all, they posted essentially a remodel of their first drop, and people were super disenfranchised. And the reason I think for this disenfranchisement is that they've only really ever attracted speculators. At the very heart of these models is speculation, and people that speculate are extremely fickle. That you're going from one cash grab to the other. You're seeing value in something to generate more financial value in the future. And so you see it with DeFi ecosystems, you saw it with Phantom, you saw these sort of yield locusts that would emerge. They'd go into an ecosystem, yield, rinse it, move on to another. And it seems that the same thing is happening in NFTs, because it's the same model at the core, the same value principles of getting money, getting yield, flipping. And I think if NFTs really want to break out into the mainstream, they have to model themselves on the most successful digital collectibles or digital artists or whatever it is that we've seen in Web 2. We saw Pokemon, we saw Yu-Gi-Oh, we saw Match Attacks and NBA and these baseball cards. Yes, they've got massive evaluations now, but this is sort of 10, 20, 30 years after the point. They created their brand, they created a legacy, and that legacy was built on entertainment. It was entertainment first, and the speculation came further down the line. And so I really think if any brands within just NFT, PFP projects, at least on that scale of Bored Ape Yacht Club or whatever it is, if they really want longevity, if they really want to stay around, they need to somehow break beyond the world of Web3, which is speculation, and break into the world of entertainment, which is Web2. And the only project on a large scale that I've seen so far do that is Pudgy Penguins. Shout out to them. I don't actually know what chain they're on. I think it might be Solana. Maybe Polygon. I'm not entirely sure. But they've created an entire empire of plush toys, which, okay, that's not the entertainment of I'm trading cards or it's digital collectible, but it's this, they've understood that young kids in the digital world are more likely to be drawn to NFTs, but they need something to get them in there initially. And so what better than a soft toy? What better for a kid to get their plush toy, to have a QR code on it that has, download your NFT, and then to show their parents that, oh my God, I had $20 and now it's 40. There you're hitting two cylinders. You're hitting the plush toy kid that loves the entertainment, and then you're hitting the adult who might be more willing to speculate and see there's value in that, seeing that they can get money even whilst their kid's having a great time, and then they're more likely to invest. So you really have to hit two cylinders. And I think entertainment should be like 70% of that, speculation like 30%. And, of course, we're in the nascence. Of course, it's a model that needs to be tried and tested. Of course, companies are going to, shoot up and fail, and we're going to see all this amazing stuff happen. But I think we're going to see these models learn and adapt. And I think at the core principle of those models has to be entertainment first. And I think the ones that really make it are going to be those ones that nail that. And the first I've seen is Pudgy Penguins. I'm sure we'll see more. I'm sure we're going to see a lot of projects burn before then, or, of these brands that have somehow emerged. But, it's exciting. I think everyone can learn. I think the most exciting thing to me about this technology is that it is everything to be won and everything to be learned. And there's different strategies that need to be tried and tested out. And that, the smaller projects can learn from that. The people within Hedera ecosystem can learn from that. And it's all is just trial and test. And I'm excited to see where it goes. But those are my early thoughts that I've correlated, definitely.
Well, the way I look at it is crypto and Web3 needs to be used to enhance your business. It shouldn't be necessarily the core of your business. And you said, what better than plush toys? And I can give a few examples I think that we're seeing starting to emerge in the Hedera ecosystem. We have sports with Road Code and Karate Combat. That's one example where they're using it to enhance their business. They already had a business before this, and they're using Web3 to enhance it. We can see it with Aniseed, right? Companies want to engage with conservation, and and they're using, again, NFTs to enhance their business. And of course, gaming. We can go down the line. Of course, it takes a little while for these games to come out, Earthlings and Lethos and Astronova and Legends of the Past and everybody else. But these are some things that, of course, plush toys, the Pudgy Penguins, may work, but I think we could see even more success coming out of some of these other businesses. All right, with that, let's go ahead and get into some DeFi. Looking at DeFi Llama, not including state or liquid staking, the total value locked in the Hedera ecosystem is down to just under $24 million due to the downturn in the broader altcoin market. SaucerSwap makes up $16.4 million of that, Pangolin just about $5 million, and $2.3 million is on HeliSwap. Taking a look at the returns on some of SaucerSwap's popular trading pairs, HBAR X is at 13%, 30% on HBAR Sauce, 26% on HBAR USDC, and 54% on HBAR Karate. As mentioned, Karate has bucked the downtrend in the broader crypto market and is up a few percent on the week. Pangolin has addressed the UI issues I discussed last week, and they still have some healthy returns, with the average being 68% on HBAR USDC, 375% on HBAR PBAR, and 16% on HBAR X. Now moving on to the crypto and HBAR markets, risk assets got hit pretty hard on Thursday when the jobs report came out hotter than expected, reigniting fears that the Fed will have to remain aggressive. That said, there has been a little bit of a recovery on Friday. Bitcoin has held up better than most of the alts, being down only slightly on the week. HBAR is down 1% on the day and 8% on the week at the time of recording to 4.7 cents. I would expect some support between 4.5 and 4.6 cents, and resistance at 4.8 and 5 cents. All right, Zeb, that's pretty much all we have. Is there anything else you'd like to pass on?
Yeah, I mean, this week I think has been twofold for me. I think there's a massive push from policy, that sort of grassroots, sort of getting with the people that really are going to shape the future of at least conversation to governments, to retail, to tech, to all these big names or brands that are coming out of various different countries. These are the people that are educating them. These are the people that are going to them, showing them that there's a value proposition in DLT, and to have Nilmini there as part of the Hedera conversation, who has so much behind her, accolades, respect, whatever it is, she has a voice that is there to be heard, and I'm sure everybody is listening. So amazing to see that, push where we need it, definitely. But alongside that, we've seen this consumer engagement part. As Rob said, consumer engagement is going to be a core tenet of Hedera, and to see that being, pushed out this week by someone like Blade Labs, we've seen Bamboo Meta in the past, we've seen Starburst in the past, but to have Blade Labs at a Web2 event, showing them, how a brand can become, or at least get more loyalty from its customer, I think is really cool to see. And that again plays into what we've just said, which is that NFTs shouldn't be at the heart and center of a business model, I don't think, but it should be augmenting these companies that already exist, bringing more value to them as new technology. And that's what we're seeing now with Blade Labs. And we're seeing that on the mainnet with how many NFTs have been minted. So yeah, excited to see where consumer engagement goes, and very excited to see where Nilmini continues to pioneer us in social, or at least, educational circles.
Absolutely. It was a big week. I'm sure next week is going to be a big one as well. I'm getting a confirmation of a confirmation that we're going to have Google on the HBAR Foundation Twitter space next week. So certainly check in for that. The other thing I wanted to mention is if you have any questions for Rob Allen with Sharkbites, make sure you drop them down there in the description. That's all we have. We'll see you next week.